Minister Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. It is November the 8th, 2017, but at exactly this point of the day, November the 8th, 2016, we saw a Reuters Ipsos poll saying that Clinton had a 90% chance of winning the US presidency. That was followed up by Matthew Dowd, expert pollster in America, who said Clinton has a 95% chance to win and will win by 5 million votes. But top of the pops was the Huffington Post, who at exactly this time last year said it was 98.1% certainty that Clinton would win with the Donald on 1.6%. And I sat there and I had my money on Trump, and I had said for months I thought he was going to win. And guess what? He won, and under their electoral college system, he won with quite a big, comfortable majority. All goes to show absolutely anything can happen in politics. Now, last night, I was saying to you that I thought the Prime Minister would be gone by Christmas. Very few of you agreed with me, but it does look like this government is in very real trouble. They've lost Sir Michael Fallon, Defence Secretary, a party veteran, a man who'd been a minister, one of the last links actually back to the Thatcher years in the Conservative Party. And the Priti Patel saga, which we have talked about over the last couple of evenings, has now reached a head. And joining me is LBC's political editor, Theo Usherwood. Theo, what's the story?
Well, we are expecting Priti Patel to resign within the next few moments. That's the state of play at the moment. It has been an extraordinary day in British politics. To start with, at the beginning of the day, the briefings went out. I received one of these briefings that she was going to be sacked. She was summoned back from Kenya. She was actually on her way to Uganda. She was on the 6:30 in the morning flight, having the Prime Minister having been made aware of another 2 meetings.
And this was a direct order to come back, was it?
It was a direct order to come back from the Prime Minister to come back and meet with her in Downing Street to be fired or to simply depart the cabinet on a resignation. Then, as she was flying, Priti Patel flying somewhere over the Mediterranean, a story broke on the Jewish Chronicle website, written by the respected journalist Stephen Pollard, that said that when it came to that second meeting, which hadn't been previously disclosed, that actually Number 10 was aware of that meeting. The Prime Minister was aware of that meeting. That was on September the 18th with a minister from the Israeli Foreign Office. Moreover, the Prime Minister was aware when she met Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, in Downing Street last Friday, that Priti Patel had had a separate meeting with Mr. Netanyahu when she was in Israel back in August. That is in direct contradiction to what the Prime Minister's spokesman told the Westminster lobby. And actually, I asked the question, when she sat down with Mr. Netanyahu last Friday, was she aware of that particular meeting? And the answer came back, no.
Yeah.
So we were in a situation for about an hour.
We're just hearing that Priti Patel has just left Downing Street, so I think we're going to get a statement very shortly.
We will get a statement very quickly.
So all the way through this, I mean, let's just go back to the beginning for perhaps listeners that haven't been following this as closely as we have. So she goes to Israel on holiday.
Yes. 13th to 25th of August.
With her family.
Yes.
But clearly she's a workaholic.
Yes.
So she decides to pack in a lot of meetings with important Israeli figures, up to and including Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister. And, I think Israel actually as a country needs all the support and help it can get. There's nothing wrong with her doing that. It's the fact she hasn't told her seniors that she's doing it. Is that really the absolute?
Yes, absolutely. There are 2 or 3 aspects to this which came out in a drip effect, rather than it all coming out at once, Nigel. So the first thing was she didn't inform the Foreign Office before she went. She only informed Boris Johnson on the penultimate day of the actual trip. The second thing is that when she was over there, she promised or indicated that Britain would be willing to pay money to support the work of the Israeli Defence Force in their hospitals in the Golan Heights, which is where Israeli forces are occupying.
Yeah.
Now, Britain does not recognise the Israeli occupation of the Golan Heights. It would be a significant departure from British foreign policy for international aid to be diverted to the Israeli Defence Force. So that was seen as a complete contravention of British policy, which nobody within the Foreign Office seemed to be made aware. So that was the situation on Monday.
Yep.
It then transpired late last night, and this was what prompted the Prime Minister to summon her back to London, that two further meetings had taken place, one with a public security minister in Parliament on September the 7th. And there's actually a photograph of Priti Patel with this particular minister on the terrace, where you know as well as all of us that MPs like to drink and socialise. And then there's a further breakfast meeting on September the 18th in New York. The Jewish Chronicle story, of course, turned this story on its head because it claimed that actually the Prime Minister in Downing Street knew about the second meeting at least, and knew that Priti Patel had met with Benjamin Netanyahu, despite, of course, and I should put this in and stress this point, Number 10 categorically denying
that and give it
exactly
the other side of the story. So, I mean, what is your guess? She's left Downing Street. What is your guess, Theo? Is she going to be allowed to resign, or is there possibly some compromise? Because the government, they lost the Defence Secretary just a few days ago. You know, Priti Patel, who was a very able politician and a very passionate politician, what if she's just summarily sacked and humiliated, having been forced to fly back from Nairobi this morning? Couldn't she be quite dangerous outside the cabinet?
She could be dangerous, and I would add to that there are a number of MPs, especially from the 2010 intake, who are actually now starting to come forward in support, some privately, some publicly, in support of Priti Patel. And they're not just coming forward in support of Priti Patel. They have links to Conservative Friends of Israel. They have strong links to Israel. And they're worried about how her sacking, if it is indeed a humiliation, or even if she resigns, could be perceived with one of our strongest allies, that is Israel, and how that would go down. A number of backbench MPs very worried, and there will be, I think, inevitably, Nigel, there will be a backlash to this if she goes.
If she goes. No, I'm sure that's right. Chris on text says to me, to survive until Christmas, May will have no choice but to fire Priti Patel. Well, Chris thinks Mrs May has to assert her authority. My argument last night was actually it's a bit late for that. She needed after the summer to assert her authority over both the Brexit process and over a cabinet who not only have been at war with each other, but clearly here, I mean, they're not communicating properly with each other, it seems to me. While we wait for the news, let's take a caller. Jackie from Poole in Dorset is a first-time caller of this show. Jackie, good evening. What should Mrs May do, Jackie?
Sack her straight away.
Right. Now, why do you feel that so strongly?
Well, because even if you're the most lowest level of civil servant in the Foreign Office or in the Home Office or anything, you sign a document of secrecy, and that's not talking or about any subject. You have to keep it to yourself, and this is in direct, I think, opposition to this. I think it's awful.
Yeah, and I think what backs up, Jackie, your point, and what Theo was saying a moment ago about the possibility of discussing even giving money to the occupied territories, going against government policy. I know, I mean, clearly she's done wrong here, Jackie, but do you think by sacking her, do you think Theresa May will be able to get back any of the credibility that she's lost?
Yes, but I've got something else for Theresa May.
Oh.
A wonderful hit. Now, you're going to win this election, and you're going to get through Brexit, because I know. But if you go and join her, the whole of Britain will be behind you. And Theresa May, if you go and join her with the negotiations, I think everybody will...
Well, Jackie, if she would even deign to talk to me, I'd be more than happy to use whatever experience I've got. Not just experience of Brussels, but unlike almost all the rest of them, I did spend 20 years in international business. I've bought and sold things and moved stuff around the world. But I'm afraid they don't want to talk to me. And to be honest with you, right at the moment, Jackie, given the backtracking that I'm seeing, be quite difficult for me to support them. And I didn't vote for a transition period. I didn't vote for us to go on paying these big sums of money. You know, I certainly didn't vote for us to pay a massive divorce bill. But Jackie, thank you for your suggestion, thank you for your call, and I will think about it. Michael in Orpington says the Priti Patel issue should not be mutated into an appraisal of whether Theresa May is strong or weak. Well, Michael, you may say it shouldn't be, but I have a feeling that is what the commentators are going to be looking for. How does May look at the end of this? This was supposed to be a strong and stable government. It is like watching a never-ending comedy show, except it's not funny, it's embarrassing. No, it's worse than that, because if you want to talk about uncertainty, investment or whatever it is, Theo, breaking news.
Breaking news, Priti Patel has resigned. We are just awaiting the official statement confirming that resignation, Nigel, as we expected within the last hour. And in fact, I've just got the exchange of letters. Priti Patel, I can read you her letter. Let me just load it on my screen now. It has been a tremendous privilege to serve in your cabinet since you became Prime Minister in 2016. And she goes on to say, I have seen the very best of Britain and know it will flourish on the world stage as we leave the European Union. We should be very proud that across the world, the Union flag and our aid parcels and on the projects we support is seen as a symbol of huge hope. I'm just scanning it to see whether there's an admission of her mistakes. Yes, here we go. In recent days, there have been a number of reports about my actions, and I am sorry that these have served as a distraction from the work of the Department for International Development and of the government as a whole. As you know from our discussions, I accept that in meeting with organisations and politicians during a private holiday in Israel, my actions fell below the high standards that are expected of a Secretary of State. While my actions were meant with the best of intentions, my actions also fell below the standards of transparency and openness that I have promoted and advocated. I offer a fulsome apology to you and to the government for what has happened and offer my resignation.
So there we have it. Sad, actually. In many ways, sad. She's a good woman. She's a very passionate politician. She's also, of course, one of the leading Brexiteers. And this is an interesting point, isn't it? Because when Michael Fallon went, he was a Remainer. And he was replaced by a Remainer. And this kind of balance that May has got with her own party, both in the Commons and out in the country, one wonders who's going to replace her. But Theo, can I just ask you, do you think the fact that she's given her the easy way out, the fact that May has allowed her to resign, do you think that of itself is an act of weakness?
Well, it could be seen as an act of weakness. It could also be seen as a way of just trying to take the sting out of the situation, because of course Priti Patel now returns to the backbenches, and Theresa May learnt to her cost of a fulsome, wholesale, humiliating sacking when she got rid of George Osborne when she became Prime Minister back in July 2016. And
look what happened there.
Exactly.
He's been fighting back against her every single day since.
And of course she's a lot weaker now than she was back then. So I think the resignation is probably the softest way out. I mean, I was speaking to some Tory MPs earlier, and there was even some suggestion that Priti Patel could be just made to make a grovelling apology rather than resign and keep her in the cabinet. In terms of replacements, look out for Penny Mordaunt, Brexiteer, and of course a former Defence Minister and Minister of State at the Department for Work and Pensions at the moment, and she could she'd be seen as an obvious candidate to take over. Well, I agree on the Brexiteer point.
Yeah, I know, that's very, very important. Yeah. Very important. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. We've just learned that Priti Patel has resigned. More reaction to come. The time is now 7:17. So the news has broken in the last 10 minutes that Priti Patel has resigned from the cabinet. That resignation, of course, being accepted by the Prime Minister, and she's left Downing Street, and it's the second cabinet minister that has gone within the space of a week. And I said before the break that I thought it was sad, because I think she is a very genuine person, certainly believed very strongly in the Brexit cause and all the things that she does. It's sad for her on a personal level. But perhaps to get a bit more political assessment, I'm going to ask Ian Dale, who, of course, only came off air a few minutes ago and is the presenter of the Drive Time show here every day, weekdays 4 till 7, and has been an observer, commentator and writer on the Conservative Party for some time. Ian, do you feel sorry for her?
I do, because she saw herself as a future leader of the Conservative Party, and her political career now is in complete tatters. And I don't think there's any coming back from this, certainly not to lead the Conservative Party. Cabinet ministers have come back. Liam Fox resigned in vaguely similar circumstances back in 2012, and he's come back into the cabinet.
Why do you see what she's done as being so grave?
Because it's a clear breach of the ministerial code, and she's a cabinet minister. She's presumably read the ministerial code. It's pretty elementary to know that if you're in a foreign country and you speak to foreign politicians, you have to have an advisor with you, or at least you have to tell the ambassador or the foreign secretary or the prime minister. It's not rocket science to understand that. So I felt that she was in deep trouble yesterday. She had the advantage yesterday that Boris Johnson was also in quite deep trouble as well. But for some reason, for her, it's got worse overnight. And he's gone off to Washington, and sort of, I think his position has been weakened as well, but possibly not to the extent that hers has been. And she's expendable. He's not. He's the Foreign Secretary. Her position is one of the more junior positions in the cabinet. She hasn't got a natural constituency of followers who will really sort of go and bat for her in the same way that Boris Johnson would have. So I think the one thing I do find, though, on this, I think it's extraordinary that she's been allowed to resign. If the Prime Minister wanted to look really strong, she should have just sacked her and issued a 4-line letter.
This was exactly the point that Theo Ashford and I were discussing before the break. I agree with you. I think it does look, if you've got to try and get back control of something that is careering all over the place. Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. Strong and stable as well. And it's just not happening. What do you think the implications are for the government as a whole?
I think a lot depends on what happens next week when the Cabinet Office adjudicates on Damien Green. If he is forced to resign next week, that will be 3 Cabinet Ministers in 3 weeks. Now, there is no way that however loyal people are to the Conservative Party, they can spin that as anything other than completely disastrous. But Theresa May's strong point is that there is no one out there that everyone tips to succeed her. Boris Johnson, I don't think, if there were a leadership election now, would get into the final 2. So who else is there? Amber Rudd, arch Remainer, very small majority. The only one, and people would say, I would say this, wouldn't I, because of my friendship with him, David Davis is about the only one you could make a case for being a natural successor at the moment. And I don't think he's particularly keen on that. So I don't see Theresa May's position being much weaker than it was a week ago, but I can see that circumstances where it might be. The only way she's going to go is if 48 Tory MPs write letters to Graham Brady saying that we want a vote of no confidence.
This is the 1922 committee, and that's the procedure that has to be gone through.
But do turkeys vote for Christmas? You wouldn't have thought so. The Tory party is known as a stupid party, but even though they're not that stupid.
No, but they don't have to have an election, do they? They could change a leader without having an election.
Not this time. They've done that before with Theresa May. There was no formal election then. I think there would have to be one. If they went down that route, they would probably have to concertina the timetable from 3 months to maybe 1 month. But I mean, think of the optics of this. We're in the Brexit negotiations, and you change the Prime Minister. Now, that happened in 1990 when we were in the middle of a war in the Gulf.
Yeah.
But you just think, well, that can't happen, surely. But anything can happen in politics at the moment.
Well, I was saying at 7 o'clock that, this time last year, Huffington Post were assessing Hillary's chances of winning at 98.1%. So anything can happen in politics. Theo, Ian there very strongly thinking that actually allowing her to resign does look weak.
Yes, I'd quite agree with everything Ian said. I'd just add to...
Well, that makes a change.
But I would add to what Ian said on a leadership contest within the Conservative Party. There does have to be that contest after Theresa May. There's a feeling within the Conservative Party, within the membership, that they didn't kick the tyres with Theresa May. She was simply allowed to steamroll over Andrea Leadsam's campaign. It wasn't a great start to Andrea Leadsam's campaign, and find her way into number 10 Downing Street. And then, of course, Tory members didn't really ever have a chance of seeing what she was like on the campaign trail. It would have been a leadership campaign trail, but they didn't have
it didn't happen, did it?
So then you bounce around to the general election, and she was so poor on that campaign trail. So I think there has to be an election. And of course, if there is a leadership election, you are going to have different visions for Brexit. You're probably going to have somebody from the right of the party, Eurosceptic wing of the party, who would certainly countenance leaving and reverting to WTO rules.
Yeah.
Perhaps versus somebody who would actually take a much softer approach. And then, of course, if you do that and you have somebody taking over with a new mandate, you're then opening the door to a general election against Jeremy Corbyn. And that's the big fear.
That's the turkey's voting for Christmas point about the 22 committee.
He would win.
I mean, let there be no doubt about that.
Yes,
if there is an
agree.
election within the next 12 months, I can't see a way for the Conservatives to win that election.
No, and they now have built, of course, the Labour Party with their friends at Momentum, a formidable campaigning team. I was at the Web Summit today in Lisbon, where
you get around, don't you?
Oh, I do. Where the biggest political operatives from the USA were there, and from both sides. People who'd worked for Obama, the guy that was in charge of Hillary's campaign, the guy that was in charge of Trump's campaign. And we were talking about UK politics, and both the left and the right of American politics were agreed on one thing, that when it comes to the use of social media and applying that to the ground campaign, the Labour Party are streets and streets ahead of the Tory Party, and that would be right now a very big advantage they'd have. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. Priti Patel has resigned as International Development Secretary. I'm here with Theo Ashwood and Ian Dale discussing the implications of that, but hey, this is LBC, and the point about LBC is we get the public involved, and Simon, who lives in Edgware, who's a first-time caller. Simon, you're on air. What do you think about this resignation?
Evening, Nigel. Well, first time caller to you, but not to the station.
Okay.
I don't agree necessarily with what Keir Hardie, certainly with Ian Dale. I think it's a very, very disgraceful set of events. Nobody, and let's be honest, nobody goes to a country, especially a close ally like Israel, and has a series of meetings without telling anybody. You've got to be naive if you actually believe that. And Stephen Pollard, a respected journalist from the Jewish Chronicle, which is a respected paper which has been around for over 150 years, made it quite clear that at least one, and possibly more than one meeting, Theresa May was aware of that. And it's really smacks of a very deceitful British government. I suspect there are other elements within the Foreign Office that knew about this. And one thing I want to pick up on, if Ian Dale is still listening...
He's here.
When he spoke about the Golan Hospital, Ian, you mentioned about the money going to the Israeli military, but you didn't qualify what it really was. That money that was suggested was for a hospital, a medical hospital that the Israeli Defense Forces, the Medical Corps, have been running for years on the Syrian border and have been treating Syrian refugees who are fleeing the Assad regime, who have to then return to Syria, or those who live in Syria have gone to the border for help and have had to go back under secrecy.
And you think we should be providing foreign aid to do that when Israel is quite rich enough to cover that itself?
I'm not suggesting we should be providing foreign aid. The Israeli government...
Well, that's what Priti Patel was suggesting.
Well, I think the argument, gentlemen, here is that she was there discussing this when it's not actually government policy, and that perhaps in terms of breaching what she should have been doing rather than just having meetings was a serious error. Simon, if everyone really knew, and if Stephen Pollard, who I agree is a very good respected journalist, but even the best respected journalists don't necessarily get every single story right, none of us do, ever. But if the government does know about it, why in that case are they pretending they don't and they want to see the back of this woman?
Because, well, the other reason is the Guardian leaked it, and I'm afraid once they leaked it, they had to cover themselves. And I'm afraid Theresa May, being a very weak and incompetent procrastinator, as she was when she was Home Secretary, if anyone's looked at her record, had to find a way to try and close that door. Now, I think that there are people within the Foreign Office that knew about this, and if this was any other country but Israel, I think we might be seeing a little bit of a different situation here. It's wholly embarrassing. And what Israeli government would sit down and a series of meetings without clarifying that some of those meetings would have been known by the British government? This is an embarrassment.
Yeah, but Simon, do you know something? If I've ever gone, either in business or politics, into a very important meeting, I would never go on my own. I would always make sure there was someone there with me taking notes so that at any point in the future I couldn't find I was accused of having said and done things that weren't true. Ian, final thought on this?
It's a dark day for Priti Patel, clearly. It'll be very interesting to see the political fallout for Theresa May. She didn't do what I think she should have done and sacked Priti Patel. She's allowed her to go with a bit of dignity. Now, that may be the right decision on her part. I wonder what the fallout from this will be. I think it's very difficult to tell at the moment. I think we'll know a lot more tomorrow when we see who she replaces her with, because Theo and I were having this discussion earlier, and Theo's theory is it might be someone like Penny Mordaunt, a Brexiteer, another woman. Logic, and if talent and ability had anything to do it, you would give it to Alistair Burt, but he's an arch Remainer. I mean, the archest of arch Remainers.
Why don't they just get rid of all the Remainers or all the Leavers, and we have a government and we know exactly where it's going?
Well, because they want to maintain the balance of the cabinet, and you and I might think it's actually imbalanced in favour of Remainers.
It's not working.
It clearly isn't. But I think there would be a bit of uproar on the Tory benches if it wasn't a Brexiteer and if it was someone like Alistair Burt, which is unfair on him because I think he's actually a very, very good minister.
Continuing coverage on the breaking news of the resignation of Priti Patel here on LBC. This is the Nigel Farage Show. It's 7:31. Priti Patel has quit her cabinet role as the International Development Secretary. She acknowledged in her resignation letter that her actions fell below the standards of transparency and openness. Well, as I said earlier, I feel sorry for her on a personal level, but on a professional level, it's pretty clear to me she didn't just act way outside the ministerial code. She actually got herself involved in a series of meetings that could have involved potentially a change of government policy, and didn't even take a witness with her to those meetings. And I have to say that really is very, very naive. So ultimately, I think she had to go. Personally, I think that May should have sacked her if she wants to try and get some strength back in her leadership, though to be frank, I think it's all too late. I said this last night and I mean it. I think she's lost all credibility. She doesn't look like a leader in the country. She doesn't look like the boss of a cabinet, and in Brussels, well, frankly, we've become a laughing stock, and that's the only way I can possibly put it. The Damien Green problem is still hanging around, and I understand the argument. They can't change leaders because it would force the general election, and it would let Mr. Corbyn in. That's the Conservative argument. I tell you what, if she stays as Prime Minister, Mr. Corbyn will certainly win. Theo Usherwood, still with me, LBC's political editor. Theo, what's the latest?
The latest, I think, is that Theresa May tonight is trying to hold it all together, to hold her government together. We have now had 2 cabinet resignations within the space of 1 week. Damien Green, of course, that review, that inquiry into his behaviour around women is due next week, and could it be 3 in 3 weeks? We've now had more resignations from the cabinet than we've had from Premier League managers this season.
We have every confidence in the manager. It's rather like Tory MPs saying we think Theresa May's the best leader.
You talk there about Theresa May, Nigel, and I think it is fair to say at this particular juncture that the bubble, I guess the aura around the Prime Minister that every Prime Minister has, where you are able to create some semblance, some appearance that you have control over the levers of power, that has now gone.
Yeah.
That has gone. And you know from your time in politics that every leader needs that. For me, with David Cameron, you saw that just ebb away through that referendum campaign. Whatever the result was going to be in late July last year, his credibility had gone. Theresa May has now passed that point, and the Conservative Party, Nigel, need to find a way of picking somebody, a new leader or a couple of new leaders. Somebody needs to step forward now and potentially put their hand up and say they're willing to take the party forward, because of course they are in this catch-22 situation that Theresa May stays on and the brand continues to be damaged.
Yeah.
They're only strengthening Jeremy Corbyn, and it becomes almost impossible when that election does come round to beat the Labour leader.
I must say, I think it's all too late for her. Whatever. I think the only chance they've got actually is for her to go and to find somebody else, try a fresh start, and tough it out as far as the general election is concerned. That's my view. Joining me is Andrew Pearce, columnist and consultant editor for the Daily Mail, and of course LBC presenter on Friday nights. Andrew, hello.
Hi, Nigel.
So, did she jump or was she pushed?
She was pushed, and I'm just amazed, Nigel, it's taken so long. She should have gone last Friday or Thursday when this story broke. I was astonished to hear Alistair Burt, the Foreign Office Minister, in the Commons yesterday on the rack, drawing the short straw, having to defend the indefensible Priti Patel, saying she was in the air on her way to Africa. What on earth was that about? So she was finally fired because there were 2 more meetings that the Prime Minister hadn't been told about. I heard a Tory MP on the radio, Nigel, saying, look, it wasn't intentional, it was an accident. Well, there were 14 accidents.
Yeah, that's right.
14 separate meetings, including with the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, and she didn't think it was germane to tell the Prime Minister, her Permanent Secretary, the Boris Johnson. And the truth is, Nigel, too, she effectively lied when asked about it, when she said that Boris knew.
Oh, Boris knew it was all okay, wasn't it?
That's what she said, and the fact is Boris only discovered what was going on when some people started tweeting pictures of Priti Patel on her holiday. God help us, her children, if that's the idea of a holiday. And so people became aware that she was in Israel on semi-official business. It is a staggering story, Nigel. I've always known that Priti Patel is not blessed of a great intellect, but I hadn't realised she was quite so stupid to think that she could do all of that, breach the ministerial code,
right,
insult the intelligence of Boris, and think she could get away with it.
Well, I think you put those in fairly straightforward terms, Andrew, I must say. You've watched lots of Conservative Prime Ministers over the years. I mean, would Margaret Thatcher have sacked her last Friday?
Yes.
Would John Major have sacked her last Friday?
Yes. Well, he'd have probably waited until Sunday.
Okay. And would David Cameron have sacked her?
Oh, no doubt about it. Ruthless.
So, what I'm really coming to, Andrew, and knowing your long-time support and belief in the Conservative Party, isn't this Prime Minister a complete and utter dud?
Not going to use that expression, but I'm just going to say, as someone who is struggling to support the Conservative Party, she is proving again and again that when the chips are down, she's not up to it. She should have dealt with this. She should have got a grip. She's failed to get a grip of the issues to do with the so-called Pestminster, the sex scandal. That's been hopeless. But this has been another crisis. And I keep saying to people, look, she'll survive as long as there's not another crisis. And then there is another one. I seriously think this time, Nigel, if there is one more serious crisis, they will just go, the men in the grey suits will go to her and say, Prime Minister, give us a date to go, or we have a motion of no confidence, which you require 15% of Tory MPs to do that. She would lose and then be forced to resign. They will try and give her a dignified exit.
I mean, as it is, Andrew, my view is that the longer she stays as Prime Minister, the more likely it is that Corbyn wins the next election. That's the view that I've held all the way through this. Now, I know they've got a difficulty. There's no obvious successor. But surely, unless the Conservative Party comes out with a leader that is firmly on the side of Brexit, given that Labour have basically given up on the single market and everything else, isn't this the opportunity to get a genuine Brexiteer running the country and send a big, strong message to Brussels?
I completely agree with you. The issue that is staying Tory MPs' hands, and this is how it's explained to me. Remember, they're in recess again because there's no great issues of state to discuss, Nigel. Brexit,
no, nothing at all, absolutely.
We don't need the House of Commons today. We didn't need a cabinet minister meeting yesterday. The reason they are not striking the fatal blow is this. A Tory leadership contest will take the best part of 3 months. They then have a lame-duck Prime Minister for 3 months, and Brussels will run rings round us for 3 months, delay the process, and that's why, so far, she's surviving. But I'm not sure that if there's any more disasters, they will put up with it anymore. We've just got to find the leader has to emerge. I've seen him. I don't think he's even in the cabinet. I think they've got to look at somebody like Dominic Raab, who's bright, clever, Brexiteer, looks good, sounds good. He's a Minister of State. She should have a reshuffle immediately next week, Monday or Tuesday. Bring on some of those young Turks in the middle ranking, see what they can do, and give them a chance. The one thing we do know, though, Nigel, is, thank God we now know, I always worried that Priti Patel would run for the Tory leadership, and by some twist of fate, she might win.
And now it's never going to happen.
And now it's never going to happen.
No, and
she simply isn't up to it.
Andrew, finally, as somebody, a veteran commentator who's been watching this as many years as I have, how does this rate alongside various crises, be it Westland or whatever it is? How bad a crisis is this?
This is appalling. This is appalling because it goes to the heart of ministerial competence. It goes to the heart of prime ministerial competence. The Westland crisis, for which Michael Heseltine flounced out of the cabinet in 1986, very nearly brought down Margaret Thatcher.
It did, yeah.
Very nearly. She actually left Number 10 that morning to go to the Commons and said, when I come back, I may be resigning as Prime Minister and Tory leader. She is very close to this now. And every week that I speak to you, Nigel, I think we've got another step closer to the end game of Theresa May.
No, I agree.
She's a nice woman, decent woman, but that doesn't mean you're a great Prime Minister.
No, absolutely. Andrew, I thank you enormously. And you can hear Andrew. He'll be here, sitting in this chair at 7 o'clock this Friday evening. Continuing coverage of the breaking news of the resignation of Priti Patel here on LBC, where we're going to keep you up to date with all the latest news on this breaking story. And because it's LBC, now I want your views and opinions on this subject. It's 7:45. Priti Patel has resigned, and she makes it clear that she's fallen below the standards of openness and transparency needed for a government minister, certainly for a cabinet minister. She has resigned. She's not been sacked, and I'm wondering, how does Theresa May emerge from this? Stronger or weaker? Jamie is calling me from Lampeter in Wales. What do you think, Jamie?
Hello, Nigel. Yeah, I think Theresa May could momentarily appear to be weaker, but I'm hoping that she can appoint somebody, to fill the post, and it will make her look stronger. So hopefully Theresa May can turn it around. And the other point I'd like to make is, Priti Patel would have all her advisors and assistants, and it's strange that they didn't help her and point out that she had gone down the wrong path.
Well, maybe, Jamie, it's because she was on holiday. She was there with her family and didn't have any staff with her. But it is very, very ill-advised to go into any meeting in life where money or things like that are being talked about and not at least have someone with you taking notes and being a witness. So there was a certain, I think, naivety, Jamie, about it. So you think that Michael Fallon goes, he gets replaced, that's fine. Priti Patel goes, she gets replaced, that's fine. You think everything's fine, Jamie?
Well, what I think is, we've got this big transition happening. I voted to leave the European Union. Britain's going through this enormous change for the better, in my opinion, leaving the European Union. Thank God we're leaving. That's all I can say. And I hope that Theresa May can get on top of this and use it for good. So it will be a test of her leadership. I voted to leave the European Union.
Yeah.
I think much better out, and I hope that Theresa May can get on top of this. But
Jamie, you have still got confidence that she can pull off the Brexit job properly.
Well, and look, let's face it, there is nobody coming forward to challenge her to be Prime Minister. So as it is, she's our best hope until somebody like Boris Johnson says, right, I'm going to take over. Until that point, we've got to get behind her, haven't we? We've got to encourage her.
Well, Jamie, I tell you what, Jamie, in January of this year, when she gave the Lancaster House speech, and I said on this show, wow, I never thought I'd hear a Conservative Prime Minister using words and phrases that I've been used and been condemned for the last 20 years. And I wished her well and wished her luck. I'm not feeling, Jamie, like that now. I think we look weak in Brussels. We're on the verge of conceding a huge divorce bill, which is wholly unnecessary. We've sent a signal to the rest of the world because of the transition deal that we're not open for global business for at least 5 more years. So, Jamie, I don't share it. But, look, Jamie, I thank you for your opinion. Jamie says we've got her, we must stick with her and believe in her. Roa is calling me from Hampstead. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
First-time caller, welcome.
I've spoken with you before. We're arch opposites, but I do love you.
Right. So has Mrs May got this right or wrong?
Honestly, I think she's got it right if Priti Patel has left. And just after I called, she'd left. The one thing I'd like to say, though, which I don't think there's been enough emphasis of, is just this woman is a minister in a massive department where she should know that the Golan Heights is fairly contested territory.
Yeah.
I mean, just on the bare facts of her being an idiot and quite stupid, she should have been forced to resign or been sacked. I mean, the Golan Heights, forget whether you want to send aid to Israel. I'm Jewish. I'm, very on both sides of the conflict, but it's one of the most well-known conflicts, one of the biggest conflicts in the world in history, and this woman is in the Golan saying, oh yeah, I think it might be cool that we could give you aid.
It was clearly a very, very grave political error. OK, so, Roa, no sympathy then. Patel should have gone. You've made that clear. And does Mrs May tonight look stronger or weaker for allowing her to resign rather than sacking her?
I mean, perhaps I don't understand the intricacies of this. I personally don't see the difference, so much. I think whether she resigned or sacked, she was obviously asked to leave. I think people who are upset by this appreciate that she was asked to leave, which I do, and that was the right thing. I'm not a Tory, but I think May did the right thing, which was say your position's untenable.
Okay.
You've got to go.
And how much trouble is the Tory government in your view?
Increasingly lots, but mainly because what you offer to everyone is undeliverable. So, Brexit's I'm not going to swear.
What self-government's unlivable? How do 200 countries in the world manage that govern themselves and make their own laws? How do they manage?
They manage really well, but the
why can't we?
In the EU manage even better.
No, we don't. Look, I tell you what. We'll agree to disagree. And I tell you, when we have a Brexit debate, please call in again. Roa from Hampstead, thank you. Joe in Sheffield is calling. Joe, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Good evening.
So, should May have sacked her? Would she have looked stronger if she'd sacked her?
She should not have sacked Patel. This is shambolic. This is stupid. At a time we are negotiating Brexit, where all energy should be focused on that, sacking Priti Patel is not the right or the sensible thing to do. It's like prosecuting a war and squabbling back at home about school meals.
Right.
I think she should not have gone. And I don't think she looks stronger for it. She looks weaker, that she's being tossed here and there by the frenzied craze in the media right now. So,
well, there are frenzied crazes on this and on Pestminster and on all sorts of things at the moment, Joe. But, Joe, Priti Patel was a strong voice for Brexit in the referendum and still believes in it very, very strongly today. But, Joe, if you have a minister that breaks the ministerial code, starts to get involved in policy debates on areas that are outside of government policy and doesn't report back to the commanding officer, there is a problem there, isn't there?
There might be a problem. It's a mistake. I expect Theresa May to come to the Commons and say, Patel has made a mistake. She's apologized for it. We'll move on. She won't do that again. That's how leaders do. You are not besetted or tossed here and there by James Landell or the BBC or some crazy plots by some acrimonious who want to topple a weak government, topple Eurosceptic Corbyn, install a Blairite, and ultimately stop Brexit.
Yeah, well, Joe, that's the last thing I want as well, as you well know. Joe, I thank you for your call, and Joe is upset about what's happened today, and he won't be on his own, because there are a lot of people out there who are Brexiteers that want this to happen, and they see every different twist and turn in this story as delaying Brexit and perhaps even making it weaker. Gary is calling me from Ilford. Gary, good evening.
Yeah, I take a different view about Priti Patel in the sense that she's been an MP for some time. She's also been a minister in two different departments. And for her not to know about the ministerial codes, I don't buy it. I feel Downing Street or the Foreign Office knew something about it. I feel she's much more of a sacrificial lamb.
Gary, you're the second caller tonight that said that. And I'm going to ask you the same question I asked the previous one. Why would they do this? How is it in their interests to turf her out?
I would have believed it if it was some small country in another part of the world. But here, the most sensitive country in the world in terms of politics, in terms of so much huge issues at stake, and for her to blatantly visit and be engaged in meetings, she's too smart to not to know that about ministerial code. I believe you that it. I think she's been let down. Boris said he didn't know anything, and she said she did. Who would you rather believe, Boris or Priti?
Well, and that's the problem with Priti Patel's story, I'm afraid, Gary, isn't it? It's changed several times over the course of the last few days. Gary, I thank you very much indeed. Priti Patel is the scapegoat in this whole sorry story. May is the root cause through her lack of management and leadership and should go, says Ollie. Well, whichever way you look at this, Priti Patel was there in Israel meeting lots of people, including the Prime Minister Netanyahu. I want us to reach out and be as supportive within reason of Israel as we possibly can be. They're surrounded by neighbours that don't like them very much. But if you go and do something like this, you have to have the wit to take someone with you to observe things, to take notes, and you certainly have to let your commanding officer know that you've met another head of state. So I'm afraid she did have to go. Does May look weaker because she didn't sack her and allowed her to resign? It doesn't matter. It's all too late, in my opinion. This Prime Minister, I'm sorry, she's a disaster, and that's not good for the Conservative Party. I couldn't care less about that. It's not very good for the country, and it's bad for the Brexit negotiations. I'm going to be in Strasbourg next week. They'll be laughing at us even more than before. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC, where we had the breaking news tonight of Priti Patel's resignation. I'm back tomorrow evening from 7. Coming up at 10 tonight, it's Ian Collins. But up next, with more coverage on that breaking news story, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you very much.